An article by Brian Cates from Uncover DC, September 9th, 2020. Donald Trump deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. On September 9th, a member of the Norwegian Parliament, Christian Tybring-Gjedde, nominated U.S. President Donald J. Trump for the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. Such a nomination of this president will strike many as being absurd after more than 4 years of nonstop histrionic media coverage that paints Trump as an out-of-control warmongering buffoon in the pocket of Russian President Vladimir Putin. After the real estate billionaire won the 2016 election, there were loud pronouncements of forthcoming doom and gloom in the media. Donald Trump, with the nuclear codes, would be a disaster, we were all assured. The brash, thoughtless, and impulsive blowhard would instantly antagonize other world leaders with his swaggering alpha male act, making the world a far more dangerous place. Well, excuse me. Far from blowing the world up, Trump continues to solve seemingly intractable problems that stumped the Washington policy wonk class for years, if not decades. It appears the only thing Donald Trump has blown up in his first term as America's president was the illusion that foreign policy class in Washington knew what it was doing. Fact of the matter is, Trump turned out to be right, and the Washington, D.C. smart set was wrong. Let's just take a quick walk down memory lane and compare the scorecards, shall we? Obama tells Trump he'll be going to war with North Korea. The first big foreign policy crisis that the newly sworn-in President Trump faced with was North Korea. Super smooth Nobel Peace Prize winning Obama sadly informed the uncouth and boorish Trump that he was going to have to go to war with North Korea. Then, surprise, Trump successfully de-escalated the conflict between North and South Korea by establishing a direct dialogue with Kim Jong-un. The world was then treated to the amazing spectacle of a U.S. president setting foot inside North Korea. While Trump helped the two Koreas start peace talks, we spent over a year with the international foreign policy experts claiming that by legitimizing Kim and speaking to him directly, Trump was doing it all wrong. Reigning in China. What's strange about the DC political class criticizing Trump for talking to Kim face to face is that these are the same foreign policy wonks who spent decades preaching ever-expanding engagement with the brutal Chinese Communist Party regime in China as a super smart policy. Under former presidents like Clinton, the Bushes, and Obama, the United States not only established a dialogue with this evil and repressive regime in Beijing, we ended up joining ourselves at the hip to the Chinese Communist Party by moving vital national security industries to China. It took a worldwide pandemic originating in China for the folly of this kind of China policy to become evident, and now President Trump has the necessary decoupling from China already underway. Taking down ISIS. Obama also famously derided ISIS as the JV team, despite being repeatedly warned that the terrorist organization was a very real threat. Obama did nothing, then watched as ISIS proceeded to unleash a bloody reign of terror, seizing control of parts of Iraq and Syria. When Trump became president, ISIS controlled territory larger than many U.S. states. Trump quickly moved to help our allies in the region take ISIS down, and by the end of 2018, the terrorist caliphate had been reduced to 1% of its former size. Trump then authorized the raid that killed ISIS's crucial leader, who was supposed to be irreplaceable, as the terror cult's belief was that he was the only one who could establish the Islamic State. Canceling the Iran deal. Obama was gifted with a Nobel Peace Prize early in his first term. It appeared to be based chiefly on expectations of what he would accomplish in the foreign policy arena. Those expectations were never met. Obama's 8 years in office could be described as one long litany of foreign policy blunders, setbacks, and mistakes. From refusing to show even token support of the Green Revolution in Iran in 2009 to the Russian annexation of Crimea and the subsequent invasion of Ukraine to the rise of ISIS and his failure to enforce his own stated red line in Syria to the scandal of Benghazi, it was Obama and not Trump who stumbled from one foreign policy blunder to the next. The crown jewel of Obama's foreign policy efforts is, of course, the Iran deal. The Obama administration tirelessly sought this deal based on a firm belief that a Russian-backed Iranian nuclear hegemony over the Middle East was inevitable, and the best that could be hoped for was to merely delay the Iranian nuclear breakout by a few years. Trump loudly campaigned on scrapping the Iran deal should he win the presidency, and upon assuming office, he wasted little time in following through on that promise. As usual, the foreign policy think tank establishment, deeply entrenched in Washington, D.C., spent months patiently explaining what a blithering and stupid move this was on Trump's part. Those who invested heavily in this assumption that the Russo-Iranian nuclear umbrella was the only possible future of the Middle East region are only now belatedly discovering just how wrong they were. There was a legitimate alternative, and Trump is creating it right before their eyes with a newly announced peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. There are already rumors that the Saudi Arabia, Oman, Bahrain, and several other Arab states will be following UAE and making treaties with Israel. The Kurdish genocide that didn't happen. Last year, when Trump announced he'd be removing several hundred U.S. troops from Syria since ISIS was now effectively defeated, we were all assured in the most strident tones possible that Trump's abandoning the Kurds by shifting these troops would cause a genocide. Of course, no such genocide happened, and in July, a secret deal more than a year in the making was announced that will send billions in oil profits to the Kurdish Autonomous Region. Now, all the people who spent months viciously slandering this president for abandoning key allies to, quote, genocide, look as foolish as they deserve to. Moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Foreign policy experts appeared on network news shows where they pontificated that by moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, Trump was making yet another impulsive mistake that would set back peace efforts in the region for decades. Leaving aside the fact that the 3 previous U.S. presidents had all promised that they would make this exact move and then found creative ways to renege on it, not only did this embassy move not stunt peace in the region, it appears to have directly led to the newly revealed Israel-UAE deal mentioned earlier, taking out the world's #1 terrorist. When Trump ordered a drone strike that took out Iran's top terrorist, General Qasem Soleimani, the denunciations of Trump's foolish and incredibly dangerous action were swiftly delivered. Hysterical politicians and political pundits thundered that Trump would end up starting a war with Iran. Well, of course, no war with Iran developed, and since Soleimani was essentially irreplaceable, having been the operational commander of all of Iran's proxy terror groups, the attacks on U.S. citizens and embassies in Iraq quickly ended. The Serbia-Kosovo deal. The Serbian conflict was long and especially brutal, and for over 20 years things remained in a bitter stalemate until President Trump got involved. As former U.S. Ambassador to Germany Richard Grenell has noted, the mainstream media is dealing with the stunning announcement of the Trump-brokered Serbia-Kosovo economic deal by ignoring it. Grenell had to write an op-ed to explain the content of this historic deal, since the mainstream media focused on everything but what the deal really does. The dog that didn't bark. So just to quickly sum up before going on, Trump threaded the North Korean needle, took down ISIS, solved the Syria, Turkey, Kurd, Gordian knot, moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, got the Israel-UAE deal. Then the Serb-Kosovo deal, took out the operational leader of all of Iran's proxy terrorist organizations, scrapped the Iran deal, and began the much-needed decoupling from China. And he has accomplished all of this with the globalist elite class loudly screaming the entire time for him to stop. If you listen to people like John Bolton or General Mattis, Trump's foreign policy has been one unmitigated disaster after another, and it's nothing but desperate gaslighting by a political class that sees its own power and influence slipping away the more Trump fixes world crises and problems that they were impotent to fix themselves. The only way the Trump has been a disaster at foreign policy narrative can work is if the mainstream media just passes over and ignores his accomplishments, which is precisely what they are trying to do. It's getting harder and harder to keep it up. The last gaslighting stand of the global elite. As it becomes increasingly apparent that the supposedly clueless and boorish Trump is literally fixing the seemingly intractable foreign policy problems the DC elite class were powerless to solve, the more desperate that elite class becomes to remove him from office. You must understand, they know what happens to them if Donald J. Trump gets another 4 years in the White House. So, their only chance is to take him down now. The futile Trump secretly thinks fallen American soldiers are suckers and losers story in The Atlantic is nothing more than a desperate, gaslighting smear coming from an incompetent and increasingly irrelevant DC elite class trying to get Joe Biden into the White House. They cannot stop Trump. If they could, they would have by now. And I strongly suspect Trump has more aces up his sleeve to play before November 3rd gets here. None of the details of the Kurdish oil deal, the Israel-UAE deal, or the Serbia-Kosovo deal leaked in advance. This president very well could roll out another unexpected deal in the next 50 days. I wouldn't bet against him. The DC elite class did. And look where they are now. Brian Cates entered the political arena in March 2012, following the death of Andrew Breitbart. He is currently a political columnist for the Epoch Times and Uncover DC. Brian is based in South Texas and is the author of Nobody Asked for My Opinion, but Here It Is Anyway. Twitter, @DrawAndStrike, Subscribestar, Brian Cates, Epoch Times, Brian Cates, and donate any amount at paypal.me/drawandstrike. Thank you for listening.